Jai Mahamaya Ki Jai, Vishveshvari Mata Ki Jai. We'll go on with chapter 49 from the Devi Bhagavatam, retold by Ramesh Menon. Janamejaya. King Janamejaya asked the Muni Veda Vyasa, Guru, I have heard the Devi Parvati is called Sataksi, thousand-eyed. How did she get that name? Vedavyasa said, in time out of mind, when all beings were immensely greater than they are in these diminished times, there was a Danava, a demon called Durgama. Durgama once thought to himself that the Munis who sustain Dharma in the three worlds have their strength from the Vedas, for it is with the mantras and the yagyas prescribed in the sacred books that they worship the Devas, who in turn are sustained by their worship. If the Vedas could be destroyed, that demon calculated, so would the Muni's power, and thus the Devas themselves could be destroyed. Durgama took himself to the loftiest peak in the Himalayas and sat in a freezing drift of snow and began an intense, unequaled tapasya. He worshipped Brahma, the creator of all races, in the space within his heart, unflinching, never opening his eyes, breathing just once or twice every hour. That great demon sat yoked into his single obsessive purpose. 1,000 years passed, and the demon's dhyan grew so powerful that the tejas, the luster from his head, spiraled through the three worlds as subtle fire. All the finer realms were pervaded by this heat, and the Devas grew terrified. No god can ignore such tapasya as Durgama sat in, and at the end of the 1,000 years, Brahma appeared before that demon. He arrived mounted on his white swan. Durgama was dazzled by the splendor of the four-faced apparition and opened his eyes, prostrated his emaciated form before the Creator. Brahma said, ask what boon you want of me, Asura, and it shall be yours. Lord of the worlds, replied the demon, let the Vedas belong just to me. Let the power of every mantra and all four Vedas suffuse me so that I can conquer the Devas and be sovereign of the worlds. From this moment, let no one else have the Vedas but me. After his searing penance, Brahma could not refuse what he asked him for. It was hard, though, because Brahma is the author of the Vedas, and he flinched to hear what the demon wanted. But he said, let it be so, and vanished. At once the Brahmanas forgot the Vedas. No longer did they perform the sacred rituals that keep harmony in all things and peace and light in the world. No more did they offer worship to the Devas. The rites of the fire ceremony, Shraddha, Yagya, Japa, and all the rest became extinct as if they had never been. No longer did the gods receive their offerings that make them strong, and with which they in turn nurture the world. A dreadful cry arose from the heavens, the three worlds, as if the very soul of creation had perished. The Brahmanas trembled and wailed, how has this happened? Soon everything was to be explained. The Asura Durgama, radiant with the immense power of the Vedas, shining like 10 suns, arrived at the gates of heaven and blew an echoing challenge on his war conch like the thunder of the apocalypse. The Devas were so weak, they fled from the demon, knowing that they could not fight him in their condition. Indra and his people hid in the secret caverns of Mount Sumeru and began to worship the Devi Bhagavati. Meanwhile, with Brahmanas having lost the Vedas, all fire ceremonies ceased on earth. Great epidemics stalked the world. Terrible plagues visited the sons of men, and even the natural beasts suffered, since not a drop of rain fell. Rivers and pools, tanks and lakes all ran dry. A savage drought swept the earth. Indeed, for 10 years this drought lasted, and millions perished. man and beast, bird and insect, and even the plants of the world. Corpse and bones were strewn across the lands, and in the case of men, no one could be found to perform the last rites or even set the dead alight, so that their souls may be gathered to their fathers on high. The Brahmanas of the earth met together and climbed the blessed Himalayas, and there did tapasya to the divine mother Devi Bhagavati. Ceaselessly they chanted her sacred names and begged her to save the world. At last, pleased by their devotion, the Devi appeared before those Brahmanas one day. She was effulgent. She was black as coal. She was four-armed with a bow and a quiver, a lotus, and the bright seeds of life in four hands. She was entirely beautiful. When the Brahmanas prostrated themselves at her feet and begged her to help them, it is told that the Devi suddenly had 1,000 eyes all over her dark body. These eyes were wide open and full of grief to see her bhakta's misery. She began to weep from those 1,000 eyes, and her tears flowed as precious streams and rivers down into the world. Then she raised her fourth hand and scattered the divine seeds she had in them everywhere. From them sprang up fruit trees of every kind of plants, vegetables, grass, and grain all over the famined world. The Devi's tears rose into the heaven as vapor and thunderstorm lashed the parched earth, which drank down the life-giving waters in gratitude. When all this happened in less than it takes time to tell, the Devas also emerged from the caves on Sumer, where they huddled in fright like hunted animals. They drank the tears of the Devi's mercy and were renewed by them. And with the Brahmanas, they too began to hymn the mother of the universe. She fed them unearthly fruits and vegetables and roots with her own hands, and they had their strength back. For her 1,000 eyes that wept in mercy, the Devi was called Sataksi. And for the precious green food she gave the starving Brahmanas and Devas, and indeed the earth, she was called Sakambari. Now the Devas and Brahmanas implored her, "Mother, restore the Vedas to us, or how will we sustain even ourselves, let alone the three worlds?" Meanwhile, the sinister Durgama, who ruled the three worlds, now heard the thunderstorm of the Devi's tears. He saw lightning gash the sky and knew that danger threatened. That demon set out for the Himalayas with a huge army. Seeing him come, the Devas and the Brahmanas cried to the Devi in terror, "Save us, Bhagavati, or we'll die." Smiling, she drew a luminous circle of protection around them with her hand. She stayed outside that circle herself. Durgama and his army arrived, and a frenzied battle broke out. The face of the sun was covered with blizzards of arrows, so darkness fell over the earth, and the archers of both sides could not see clearly. Archers of both sides could not see clearly anymore. The mountain shook with the virile twangings of bowstrings. Pierced with 1,000 asura shafts, the Devi gave a scream to freeze the rivers of the mountains. She grew vaster still, brighter still, and now from her body there issued the Mahashaktis, the ferocious Kalis, Kalika, Tarini, Tripura, Bhairavi, Kamali, Makali, Mohini, and 10,000 others. They sprang howling from the black body of the Devi Bhagavati in a moment. And in a moment, too, the rampaging Shaktis consumed hundreds and thousands of demons with fire and banks of arrows, immense swords that hewed the heads off 10,000 demons at once. And some of the more savage goddesses swept up 1,000 asuras and stuffed them into their mouths, wide as valleys, and chewed on them, their screams echoing from the sheer mountainsides, and their blood flowing down the Shakti's jowls like beetle juice. Durgama's roars shook heaven and earth, and in a froth, he charged the Shaktis with his other 900 legions. 10 days and nights that battle lasted. On the 10th night, Durgama performed a long and potent ritual of darkness, invoking the Atharva Veda, and on the 11th morning, he came to battle smeared in red sandal paste, wearing vermilion garlands like a crimson mountain himself. He came in his black crystal chariot like a second ominous sun risen at dawn. When the arcane strength from the Vedas coursing through his body, the great Asura faced Mahashaktis. They fought for barely an hour, and then those elemental women fled from him, for he was irresistible. Durgama came face to face at last with the Devi Bhagavati. They were like two figures out of a cosmic dream of darkness and light. The Devi entirely beautiful, serene and effulgent, and the demon dread incarnate, evil embodied. For 12 hours they fought, and while they did, the earth no longer rotated on her axis. So terrific was their contention. The sun stood still at his zenith, gazing down in awe at that battle. The Devas and Brahmanas and the Asuras whom the Shaktis had not slain all cowered in terror at the ferocity of this fight. Then with a roar that sent avalanches hurtling down the mountain slopes, the Devi loosed 15 sizzling arrows at Durgama in the blink of an eye. The first 4 killed the Asuras' horses, the 5th beheaded his Swarathi, the 6th and 7th put out Durgama's eyes, the 8th cut down his flagstaff, the 9th and 10th severed his arms, and the last 5 smashed into his heart, so it blew apart in an explosion of blood. The demon fell at the Devi's feet, and as the Devas and Brahmanas watched wonder-struck, a lucific light of his spirit emerged from his body and merged with the Bhagavati. The Devas and Rishis fell on their faces before the Devi and sang her praises. They saw that in her delicate hands, which has strewn the seeds of plants across the earth, there shone something else now, blinding with light. With an ineffable smile, she returned the Vedas to the Brahmanas and vanished. And because she slew the demon Durgama, she is known as Durga from then on, said Veda Vyasa to King Janamejaya. Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshwari Mata ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai.